Let's begin.
Hey there, scary story fanatics. Welcome back to Cleaving Thought from Bone with your host, Sociopathic. Do you hear that? Sounds like the next chapter of my novel. So, if you wanted to know what was going to happen next, sit back, relax, and get ready for Chapter 3 of Buried Secrets. I heard something in the woods. When I was about 7 or 8 years old, we moved back to our woodland home in the mountains. Everything looked the same. The pine forests and fresh grass smelled familiar, but nothing felt as it used to. Next door to where I lived used to reside a small family with children I used to play with not all that long beforehand. Heather had never been found, and although I didn't know it at the time, most everyone was assuming the worst. Jason's parents moved away soon after we did, taking him with them, albeit a 5-minute drive down the road, heading north out of town, leaving the small house next door vacant and full of what felt like hollow memories. The time I spent with my childhood friends seemed like a good dream that was not only cut short, but was never bound to last. There was an intangibility to my childlike experiences with my friends, and whatever that element was that could not be seen or touched was now gone from that house, along with the family that used to live there. And though the kids at school were nice to converse with occasionally, and the surroundings felt more comfortable, like a security blanket, there was a crestfallen shadow blanketing my home, lending with it an aura of depression and isolation that I did not yet fully understand. I came back to this place, hoping to recapture those feelings of my youth while escaping the barren fields surrounding that converted horse barn on all sides. Instead, something about this place only seemed to amplify those notions of dejection, leaving the most promising of days somewhat insipid and bleak. We hadn't been gone for more than a couple of months, and our move back came very sudden. My parents informed me of their relocation plans, and we were packed within a week. I was beginning to really hate moving, but at least we moved back into our old house, as different as things were. For weeks, I longed for someone to spend time with. Jason and Heather were not in school during class hours. No one from school lived anywhere near where I did, and there were a few miles between most houses. This is the time that I convinced my parents to buy me a video game system. And although they got me one, in hopes of helping to occupy my free time, I soon lost interest. Things just weren't as fun without someone around to share the experiences with. After a few downtrodden weeks of boredom and loneliness, my luck changed. Jason's mother had called my mom and left a phone number for which I could use to call my friend from our house's landline. Not only did I immediately call him after school, but I begged my parents to drive me the few miles to go see him. Unfortunately, they denied my request, telling me that such things were not feasible on a school night. However, my mother agreed to have my father drive me to his house that coming weekend. My father had been standing in the door to the kitchen for the last part, and his expression changed to one of slight disdain, having been volunteered to play taxi. But Dad wasn't working much anymore, or so it seemed, so it's not like it was one of his few days off. I really didn't understand what my father did for a living, only that it was technical, and currently it allowed him to have a lot of free time at home. So, with no excuse to use, no way to weasel himself out, my weekend plans were set. It would be the first time I'd seen my friend in the better part of a year. When we first pulled into that driveway, that small but looming blue house that I'd only seen while passing by in my parents' car, simultaneously inviting with adventure and encompassing omnipotence, I happily exited the car and said goodbye to my father, watching him back out of the driveway, filled with a sense of rapture at seeing my friend. Before my dad had even gotten out of sight, I had run up to the door, knocking on it, prompting those inside to open the front door for me. "Oh, hi! Jason's been waiting for you. He's out back playing in the field," Jason's mother told me, pointing towards the back of the house and a sprawling field behind it, ending at a distant tree line on the back end. It reminded me a lot of the landscape surrounding that converted horse barn, and thus flooded me with discorporated feelings of lonesomeness, confusion, and unexplainable dread. Still, soon, I spied a figure not much further than 100 feet in front of me, crouched down low in the tall grass. At first, I thought he was attending to something at his feet that I had yet to see, but in reality, he was pretending to hide from me, hoping to jump out at me and scare me half to death. I thwarted his plans when I got within range and called out to him. He stood to his feet and walked towards me. I extended my hand for a shake, but Jason took one step closer, opening his arms and giving me a hug. "How are you? So cool you're back," Jason said, stepping back. A grin graced his face from ear to ear, and I'm not sure if he was trying to hide it, or if he simply wasn't aware that he wore it on his expression. But while Jason smiled, his eyes allowed a deep sorrow to seep through. I would have asked him what was bothering him, but I already knew. It bothered me too. To pass the day in the sunshine, Jason and I played for hours in that field, and within the forest nearby. Jason had the great idea of playing hide and seek, and I foolishly agreed. Even if he hadn't been living there long, he certainly knew his property better than I did. Therefore, I subsequently spent most of the afternoon losing game after game to my best friend, and having the time of my life doing it. I was just so happy to have my friend back again, the feelings of loneliness and isolation evaporating from my emotional reservoir, leaving me fulfilled. Knowing now what I didn't know then, my sense of anxiety should have never subsided. And maybe I should have been on high alert consistently. But hindsight reveals simple truths somehow so easily overlooked. I stood up against a large pine, my forehead pressed firmly against its bark, counting to the designated number of 50. I hadn't even gotten to the count of 10 when I heard Jason take off into the woods behind me, leaves thrashing and twigs snapping as he scurried to flee while I counted closer to my stopping point. At about the count of 25 to 30, I heard another sound of leaves and sticks scuffling about the forest floor. But with my eyes closed, I could only tell the direction in which they were emanating from. It was on the other side of the tree, a few feet in front of me, and opposite the direction that I had heard Jason run off into. Additionally, these movements were not frantic and hurried. Instead, they were slow, methodical, and plotted. Jason was obviously sneaking about the forest, trying to stealthily double back towards me, hiding close to the starting point so as to throw me off of his trail. However, his scheming wouldn't work out as well as he had hoped, for in another moment, I'd finally finished counting. "Ready or not, here I come!" I shouted, opening my eyes and scanning the forest all around me where I stood. I expected to see maybe him duck behind some standing tree trunk or fallen log, looking in every direction and in every hiding spot proximal to myself. Nothing. Wherever Jason was, he wasn't hiding anywhere near there, and soon I ventured off into the forest a little further, investigating every detail with my eyes. And that's when I heard it, sounding so very much like the gentle breeze that wove between the tall pines, that I assumed that's what it was. But soon, with the breeze, came a cadence, as if the air itself was speaking words. I stopped, listening intently to the sounds of nothing around me, thinking maybe it was Jason shuffling in place, revealing his hidden location. But then it came again, the sound of a whisper, spoken by an undetermined amount of individuals. But I couldn't really make out what they were saying, or if it really was anything other than the wind. There were no people in sight. Jason was nowhere to be found, and soon the whispering grew louder. Not overwhelmingly loud, or even moderately loud, but loud enough for me to hear what it was that they were saying, in bits and fragments anyway. I could have sworn I heard someone whisper the words, Jason, unhappy, and soon. There was a lot of speaking taking place between these words. Of this I was sure, but these were the ones that I had heard nearly as clear as day, thereby nullifying my theory on the wind. Someone, or a group of people, were out here in the woods with us. Jason didn't have any neighbors, except for an old woman living alone next door. Even at such a young age, I knew that whatever or whoever was nearby was likely not benign. As I stood there, spinning in place, trying to locate the source of the sounds as they grew louder, I saw him. Jason was back beyond the edges of the tree line, in the field, ducking down in the tall grass, much the way I saw him when I had first arrived. I immediately began running to him, not because I wanted to win, but because I wanted to get the hell out of those damn woods and whatever lurked within, failing to notice until some time after that as soon as I spotted Jason, the whispers stopped. When I had reached him, Jason was crouched back down behind the cover of weeds, and if I had not seen him poking his head out earlier before ducking back down, I may not have found him at all. I, of course, told him about the noises in the forest that I had heard, and he, of course, thought that I was full of crap, having not heard anything of the sort. He argued that it was his turn to look and that it was my turn to hide, but I told him that I wasn't going back in those woods. It took some doing, but I finally convinced him to play inside his house instead of the field behind it. Once he agreed, we trekked towards his back door, leaving the gloom of the dimly lit timberland on the other side of the field behind us. We both burst through the back door with an explosion of carefree childhood excitement, oblivious to the tribulations of the world around us. The only things on our minds were video games and catching up on old times, and for a few moments, I even got to see my friend without that crestfallen look in his eyes. As we made our way into the living room, Jason and I paused, stopping short of the stairs leading to his room on the second floor. Jason's mom was in the living room, clutching the cordless phone in her hands, as if she were unable to put it down, but not speaking into it. Instead, she simply held it close to her chest. I would find out later that she had just hung up when Jason and I had burst through the door. She had been visibly crying, but her expression was contradictive. She looked happy. Of course, Jason asked his mother what was wrong, and when she told him and I together, I was in so much shock. I didn't think the information truly set in for a few days. I too was happy, relieved and confused. I had so many questions, but Jason was beating me to all of them, asking where, why, and who was responsible. Unfortunately, Jason's mom, or Nancy as I would call her later in life, didn't have many answers yet either. All she knew was that Heather was found, alive, not far outside of town, less than an hour away. I wanted to know more myself, but within a half hour, my father was there to pick me up, early at what I assumed to be Nancy's request. I bid my friend farewell, and told him that I'd see him soon, before heading out of the door and getting into my father's car. However, it was when he pulled from place that more questions came to mind, especially when I told him about Heather, and he seemed surprised. In fact, when I told my mother, so did she. But why? If Nancy had called for them to come get me, why were they so shocked to hear the news? Sadly, these thoughts ended up by the wayside of my mental focus, along with the strange noises that I had heard in the woods earlier that day. Looking back, I wish I had the capability to connect the dots a little sooner. Unfortunately, it likely would have made no difference. Things still would have ended up the same.
If you're left a little off kilter, don't fret. There's plenty more of this story to tell, as we're 3 chapters in, with 8 more chapters to go. But you won't have to wait long for more gore galore. Just stop by again next weekend. And until then, make sure to like, share, subscribe, and turn on notifications so I can catch you all again next Saturday.
Social media can be very unpredictable, especially regarding horror content. If this content gets removed, all new content will be simultaneously presented on various websites provided in the description to this video. Make sure to follow me in other digital spaces so that you never miss out on the terror. Also, if you like this video, make sure to leave a comment and hit the like button. It helps the channel a lot. If you're new to the channel and you enjoy what's here, consider hitting that subscribe button and the notification bell so that you never miss an upload. Writing is a dream of mine, and it's all of you that make that dream come true.